Thucydides tells the memorable story of the Athenian expedition to Melos, a city-state on an island of the same name in the Aegean. He recounts that while Melos was in fact a Spartan colony, the Melians refrained from taking sides in the war and were at pains to maintain their neutrality. Only when Athens began aggressive action by plundering its crops did Melos react in a hostile manner. Thus, Thucydides, although himself an Athenian, portrays the Athenians as the aggressors in the conflict and as unnecessarily creating a new enemy out of a neutral state. The so-called Melian Conference, or dialogue, is Thucydides' reconstruction of the negotiations between the Athenian generals and diplomats on the one side and the Melian elders and magistrates on the other. The Melians are in a difficult position. The mighty Athenians, along with their allies, have come with a powerful force. They demand that the Melians submit to them and be incorporated into their empire, paying tribute like the other states under Athenian control. The Melians are a small city-state, and their allies and best hope for help, the Spartans, are far away. So the Athenians confront the Melians with an ultimatum: either submit to being a part of the Athenian empire or be destroyed. The Melians understandably object that they never did anything to the Athenians and bear no grudge against them. Even in Athens' conflict with Melos' old friends, the Spartans, the Melians remain neutral. They argue that it's simply not right or just that the Athenians have invaded their country and made the demand to give up their freedom. They thus appeal to morality and to what's right. The Athenian delegation, however, rejects this out of hand. They argue, quote, "You know as well as we do that right, as the world goes, is only in question between equals in power, while the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must," end quote. Here, one could hardly ask for a clearer statement of a might makes right argument, which was characteristic of the Greek warrior ethic. According to the Athenians, it's a law of nature that the stronger rule the weaker, just as in the animal world, where wolves eat rabbits. In this world, there can be no talk about what's right or wrong. There's no morality per se. This is just the way the world has been created. In Plato, this is the argument of Thrasymachus in the Republic and Callicles in the Gorgias. Since all else is just human convention, the only thing that we can be sure about when it comes to human relations is that justice is whatever the strong say it is, since they're the ones who rule. The Athenian delegation alludes to Athens' right to its empire because they defeated the Persians. In a word, their right is derived from their strength and military success. The Athenian delegation tells the Melians to give up talking about right and justice since they are confronted with a serious threat to their state. They need to focus instead on expedience or self-interest. In other words, they need to find the best way to save their state, whatever that might be. The Athenians thus try to make a case that it's in the best interest of the Melians to surrender and to become part of the empire. They would have to accept some minor inconveniences and pay a tribute to Athens, but that would be a small price for saving their country. Reluctant to give up their freedom, the Melians propose a treaty of friendship between them, which would allow Melos to remain neutral in the war with the Spartans. But the Athenians reject this and insist that since the Melians are weaker, they must submit to being incorporated into the Athenian empire. The Melians also make a counterargument aimed at convincing the Athenians of their true self-interest. They claim that by attacking and destroying Melos, a neutral state, Athens would be sending a signal to all the other neutral states and, in effect, make an enemy of them all. This can hardly be in Athens' best interest. The Athenians quickly brush off this argument as well. The Melians finally make an appeal to the gods. They believe that since they have justice on their side, the gods will not allow them to be destroyed, even though they are a small state facing a much more powerful one. They argue, quote, "But we trust that the gods may grant us fortune as good as yours, since we are just men fighting against unjust," end quote. In the book of Job, there is the enduring belief that God is just and ensures justice in the world despite all appearances to the contrary. Similarly, in Herodotus' notion of nemesis, there was also a simple conception of justice that leveled out what had gone beyond its proper limits. In Oedipus the King, the gods did not allow the injustice of Oedipus's crimes to go unpunished, even though they went undetected in the human sphere for a long time. In all of these cases, justice is associated with divine agency. It's thus natural for the Melians, convinced as they are of the righteousness of their position, to believe that the gods will be on their side. The Athenian negotiators reject this notion and refer to a different conception of divine justice. They argue as follows. Of the gods we believe, and of men we know, that by a necessary law of their nature, they rule wherever they can. And it's not as if we were the first to make this law or to act upon it when made. We found it existing before us and shall leave it to exist forever after us. All we do is to make use of it, knowing that you and everyone else, having the same power as we have, would do the same as we do. Thus, as far as the gods are concerned, we have no fear and no reason to fear that we shall be at a disadvantage. So here they return to their argument that it's a law of nature that the strong should rule the weak. Their claim is that this is the way the gods have created the world, and so they can hardly have any problem with the Athenians acting on it. On the contrary, the Athenians are simply conforming with the laws that the gods have set down. In this, we can see two completely different conceptions of justice, both of which make appeal to divine sanction. The two parties withdraw, and the Melians consider their situation. They decide to stick with their position and not give up their freedom. They communicate this to the Athenians and repeat their offer to make a treaty of friendship between the two states. Thus ends the Melian dialogue. When Thucydides returns to the narrative, he makes short work of the rest of the story. The Athenians immediately besiege the town, and the Melians make a few minor gains by making sorties in the night against the Athenian positions, but in the end, the Athenians take Melos. Thucydides ends his account with these events very tersely. He writes, quote, "The Melians surrendered at the discretion to the Athenians, who put to death all the grown men whom they took and sold the women and children for slaves, and subsequently sent out 500 colonists and inhabited the place themselves," end quote. After seeing the foregoing negotiations and feeling some sympathy for the beleaguered Melians, the modern reader feels a sense of shock and disbelief at their brutal treatment by the Athenians. But this is our modern sensibilities coming to the fore. It will be noted that Thucydides himself does not dwell on it for a second. He issues no word of criticism or condemnation for the Athenians' actions. This is a troubling text. Most scholars are likewise shocked by this, and only a tiny minority try to put the blame on the Melians for their obstinacy. The overwhelming opinion is that the Athenians committed a great injustice in the name of preserving their empire. What's striking is that the Melians appeal to a number of things which Pericles lauded about Athens in the funeral oration. The Melians wish to preserve their freedom, which they have enjoyed for many years, just as Pericles says of the Athenians, who received their free state from their ancestors. The Melians refuse to accept slavery, just as Pericles extols the freedom of Athenian society. From our modern perspective, there's an obvious contradiction in this. Athens thinks that it has the right to certain things, but it denies these same things to others. But from the Greek perspective, as voiced by the Athenian negotiators, there's no contradiction here. The Athenians have the right to whatever they can take and get away with, since they're strong. By contrast, the Melians, since they are weak, can only have what the Athenians will allow them. There's no conception of right or justice as we know it here. Everything is simply a naked power claim.